The rain pounded relentlessly against the city streets, each drop a percussive reminder of the storm raging both outside and within Ethan. He stood there, a solitary figure dwarfed by the towering glass and steel monolith before him, its sleek black doors mirroring his own reflection. Tired eyes, clothes plastered to his frame, utterly soaked, yet holding a fire inside him that even this torrential downpour couldn't extinguish. It was a fire kindled by a memory, a raw, bitter memory that still burned despite the 2 months that had passed. Just 2 short months ago, Ethan had walked into this very building, a beacon of hope shining in his eyes, dressed in his finest suit, every fiber of his being radiating determination. He'd shaken hands with the lone officer, a man whose name now felt like ash on his tongue, believing with every ounce of his soul that this was his moment. This was the turning point. But instead of opportunity of an open door, he had been met with a wall of cold, unfeeling rejection. "I'm sorry," the banker's voice, devoid of empathy, still echoed in his mind. The man had barely deigned to glance at the meticulously prepared paperwork Ethan had presented, his life's work distilled into those pages. "We just don't think you're the right candidate for this loan." The words hadn't just been spoken, they had landed like a physical blow, a stinging slap across his face. Ethan had poured every ounce of his passion, every spare moment, every last dollar into his dream, only to be dismissed as if he were an inconsequential speck, an irrelevant footnote in their grand financial ledger. He had swallowed the burning lump of pride and humiliation in his throat, forced a stiff nod, and walked out, the metallic taste of defeat coating his tongue. But that day, that agonizing moment of dismissal, had ignited something deep inside him, a resilient, unbreakable core he hadn't known he possessed. Now he was back. But this time the narrative was different. He wasn't here to beg for approval, to plead for a chance from those who had so carelessly cast him aside. He wasn't the supplicant. He reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around the cold metal of a key that would change everything. It was a key to the very office that had once symbolized his closed-off dreams, the place where his aspirations had seemingly been snuffed out. Tonight the story would unfold on his terms. Tonight he wasn't a man begging for a handout, tonight he was the owner. He exhaled slowly, a long, deliberate breath, steadying the trembling in his hand as he placed it on the cool, unforgiving surface of the door. The city hummed around him, a symphony of urban life, the dazzling lights of downtown glowing like 1,000 shimmering possibilities against the dark, rainy sky. With another deep, resolute breath, Ethan pushed the door open and stepped inside. Everything he knew was about to change. Ethan Vance had always understood the brutal dance of life. He wasn't a brawler in the traditional sense, but he was a fighter in the way that truly mattered. Life threw punches, and you either learned to dodge, took the hit and got back up, or swung back with everything you had. His earliest lessons came from the heart of Chicago's South Side, where he was born and raised. There, dreams weren't handed to you on a silver platter. They were forged in the crucible of relentless effort and sacrifice. His mother, Maria, embodied this truth. She worked not 1 but 2 grueling jobs, her days spent as a cashier in a bustling grocery store, her nights cleaning desolate office buildings, her body weary but her spirit unbowed. "Work hard and the world will notice," she would tell him, her voice tired but firm. But Ethan, with his sharp, observant mind, had learned another, harsher lesson. Sometimes hard work alone simply wasn't enough. The weight of their circumstances had first truly settled upon him when he was just 13. He stood in the narrow doorway of their cramped 1-bedroom apartment, a silent witness as his mother wept openly at their chipped kitchen table, her tears falling onto a stack of unpaid bills. The landlord's eviction notice, stark and unforgiving, lay chillingly atop the pile. There was no wealthy relative, no deus ex machina, no miracle waiting to swoop in and save them. That agonizing night, watching his mother's silent despair, Ethan made a solemn vow to himself. He would never again allow his future, his very existence, to be dictated or controlled by someone else's whims or the brutal indifference of a system not built for people like him. Ethan wasn't just intelligent, he was profoundly resourceful. While other kids in high school were flipping burgers at fast food joints for minimum wage, he was already playing a different game, thinking on a much grander scale. He delved into the niche world of collectible comic books. He'd scour flea markets and garage sales, buying worn-out issues for pennies, then painstakingly restore them to their former glory, meticulously cleaning pages, repairing tears and carefully rebagging them. Then he'd resell them online at a significant profit. By the time he graduated, his entrepreneurial spirit had paid off. He'd amassed enough savings to help his mom move them into a slightly better apartment, a small victory but a victory nonetheless. Yet even that wasn't enough. He craved more, not just for himself, but for the community that had shaped him, the community he so deeply loved. He watched, with a growing sense of injustice, as thriving businesses flourished in other, more affluent parts of the city. Yet, in his own neighborhood, it was a different story. Banks consistently refused to extend loans, local stores shuttered their doors, and vital opportunities simply withered and died. He saw countless individuals with immense potential struggle endlessly, not because they lacked talent or ambition, but because they were systematically denied access to the fundamental resources they so desperately needed to flourish. That's when his ultimate decision crystallized. One day he would own his own financial institution. It wouldn't be just for personal gain. It would be for every single underdog, for every person who had been told no one too many times, for every dream that had been unjustly stifled. Ethan didn't boast an Ivy League pedigree. He had no privileged mentors, no well-connected family members to smooth his path. What he possessed, however, was something far more potent: an unshakable determination, a mind sharper than most, and a work ethic that simply refused to quit. After high school, he enrolled in a local business college, a practical choice that allowed him to continue his relentless hustle. He worked 2 jobs simultaneously, delivering groceries by day, navigating the city's labyrinthine streets, and working security shifts through the long, quiet nights. Sleep became a luxury he rarely afforded himself, his body often aching with fatigue, but every single hour he spent grinding, every missed moment of rest, was another step closer to realizing his monumental dream. By the time he graduated, he hadn't just earned a degree. He had meticulously developed a solid, comprehensive business plan for a microlending company, specifically designed to inject much-needed capital into small businesses within struggling communities. He studied every conceivable angle, delved deep into complex financial structures, and diligently cultivated connections with local entrepreneurs who shared his vision. The only missing piece, the final, crucial component, was funding. And that, he soon discovered, was where the cold, hard reality hit him like a concrete wall. He had walked into that bank on that fateful day with his head held high, confidence radiating from him. He had his detailed plan, compelling market research, and robust financial projections that unequivocally demonstrated the viability and necessity of his groundbreaking idea. But the loan officer, a man cloaked in an aura of detached authority, barely spared a glance at the thick binder Ethan presented. "Your credit history isn't strong enough," the man had droned, his fingers idly flipping through Ethan's painstakingly compiled paperwork as if it were nothing more than a trivial formality, "and without significant collateral, I don't think this is a good fit for us." Ethan, fueled by a desperate urgency, had tried to push back, to explain the intricate numbers, to passionately articulate how his business wasn't just a viable venture, but an absolutely essential one for the community it aimed to serve. The banker, however, merely sighed, a sound of weary impatience, and shook his head. "Look, I understand you're passionate, but we have to be realistic. Maybe if you had a partner with more financial backing." His words trailed off, a subtle implication of Ethan's inadequacy hanging in the air. The familiar sting of rejection flared anew within Ethan, but this time, it cut far deeper, piercing beyond his pride into the very core of his belief. It wasn't merely the denial of a loan, it was a profound denial of him, of every ounce of effort he had poured into his vision, every principle he held dear. He walked out of that opulent bank, the polished floors reflecting his broken image, feeling as though the very walls of his cherished dream had just violently caved in around him. 4 weeks afterward, a creeping tendril of doubt began to insinuate itself into his thoughts. Maybe they were right. Maybe he wasn't good enough. Maybe the colossal, impenetrable system simply wasn't designed to change, and he was naive to think he could alter its course. Maybe he had finally reached his absolute limit. But then, in the deepest troughs of his despair, he remembered his mother at that kitchen table, her silent tears a stark reminder of their vulnerability. He remembered his younger self, a boy making a solemn promise to himself, a promise forged in the fire of adversity. And in that remembrance he knew with an unshakable certainty that giving up, retreating, was simply not an option. Ethan forced himself to start thinking differently. Instead of tirelessly searching for a way into the rigid, exclusionary system, he began to relentlessly seek a way around it. If no traditional bank would fund him, then perhaps he didn't need a traditional bank at all. Perhaps what he truly needed were investors. He plunged himself into the grueling world of networking, dedicating the next several months to attending every single financial seminar he could find, regardless of how obscure. He pitched his idea, his unwavering vision, to anyone who would grant him even a moment of their time. He reached out to successful self-made business owners, to seasoned entrepreneurs, to influential community leaders, anyone who might resonate with his mission. At first, the rejections continued to pile up, forming a cruel monument to his perceived shortcomings. Some dismissed him as too young, too inexperienced. Others deemed his idea too risky, too unconventional. But Ethan, true to his nature, refused to yield, refused to be deterred. Then one day the phone rang. It was a local philanthropist, a man who, surprisingly, had once faced similar denials and systemic barriers in his own entrepreneurial journey. He had heard about Ethan's passionate, persistent pitches. He didn't offer millions, didn't promise instant riches, but he offered something far more valuable, a partnership, a starting point. It wasn't merely about the money, it was about the profound validation it provided, the affirmation that someone, finally, saw the immense potential in his vision and believed in him. Ethan finally had a foot in the door, and now, standing on the threshold of his own company, he was ready to kick that door wide open and irrevocably change the game.